We are online. Read. Signs y'all might get a little bit. Play back those videos. Louder. Videos. Make sure y'all have.
Alaikum assalam.
Brothers and sisters, please let's put our phones away. About 30, 45 minutes. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله Hayya ala salat. Hayya ala salat. Hayya ala falah. Hayya ala falah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Brothers and sisters, before getting into the theme of the Khutbah, I ask that we remember our brothers and sisters throughout this Ummah of the Prophet Muhammad who may be suffering, whether we know the cause of that suffering or not. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given this Ummah the weapon of dua, the most effective tool that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us to be able to deal with the trials, the fitna, the just day-to-day challenges that we experience in this life. And I want us once again to remember our brothers and sisters in occupied West Bank and occupied Gaza. That there was a pause, perhaps about a 4-day pause in the public genocide that was taking place against the people of occupied Gaza, about a 4-day pause. And now this pause is off. And now what we have is a resumption of the tonnage of bombs that are targeting basically defenseless people, whether they are in hospitals that have been destroyed, whether they are in hiding beneath or beside the rubble that once was their houses. But the situation in Gaza is kind of unspeakable in modern times. That you and I have not seen this kind of carnage on an almost minute-to-minute basis because of social media. Were it not for social media, we would not understand and fully get a picture of what is going on today. So remember our brothers and sisters in occupied Gaza, in occupied West Bank. Remember our brothers and sisters in Sudan, who have been undergoing a power struggle for the last few months, and the victims, those who are the losers in this power struggle, are just the ordinary citizens, just the people living in Khartoum and other cities of the capital of Sudan. Remember our brothers and sisters in your du'as. Brothers and sisters, we can go on and on talking about the suffering of Muslims in Muslim majority countries. But we have to keep in mind that it's not just limited to Muslim majority countries, because you have a newly elected prime minister in the Netherlands named Geert Wilders. And this is a man who, even before he was elected to prime minister, this is, if you don't know, this is a European city, before he was elected to prime minister, he said that one of the things that he wanted to do in the Netherlands was to bulldoze down all of the masjids that are in the Netherlands. Geert said that what he was going to do if he were elected the prime minister, that he was going to ban publicly and privately to the best of his capacity. Anyone having in their possession a Qur'an. Griggs said that there will be no Muslim woman walking the streets of the Netherlands with hijab on, if in fact he is elected the next prime minister, which he is, the prime minister now of the Netherlands. And we can look around the world, we can look in Europe, we can even look in some African countries, we can look in Asia, and we can find examples of Muslims collectively and oftentimes individually being denied their basic human rights, their basic citizenship rights. So, brothers and sisters, we're living at a time where the attention of the world is magnified more on the Muslims and this Qur'an and this Ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, unlike many of the times in modern history. We have the 9/11 event. The whole world was looking at the Muslims, but now we have events just in a little small area called Gaza. And now the world's attention is once again focused on those people who are calling ourselves Muslims. What is it that is keeping those people in occupied Gaza under the circumstances that they're under? What is it that when we talk to them, they're talking about being patient with the Qur'an, with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What makes these people not, when they're being interviewed, what makes them talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and being patient with whatever Allah has in store for them? What makes them talk about when they're holding their dead babies in their arms? That this baby, although I love this child, the baby is going straight to Jannah, going straight to paradise. This is where we all want to be. Brothers and sisters, this is a window of opportunity for you and I not to try to hide and not raise conversations and not answer questions about Islam. People today want to know, what is it about you people, Muslim, minus the propaganda that every one of you all, like me, and all of us are just terrorists, just want to harm innocent people. This window of opportunity is open. Take advantage of this time that we live to demonstrate in our personal lives, in our public lives, to demonstrate what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have us do as followers of this ancient faith. Brothers and sisters, I'm not going to take much of your time, but I want to talk just for a few moments about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's compassion. There's so many attributes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us to help understand who He is. That Allah, the Most High, makes it very clear that compassion is an expression of a man, that a man or woman, that a people who are not compassionate, then they have been denied, or they have denied themselves an absolute necessity as it relates to our humanity. If, in fact, you and I are not compassionate, if you and I can see oppression, we can see displaced people, we can see all of these things and not feel sorrow and mercy for the ones who are undergoing this, that means that you are not reflecting the values that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us.
You got to turn it down.
Turn the mic away. Okay. Sorry. that if in fact you and I cannot find it in our hearts to be compassionate with others, to be compassionate with our families, compassionate with everyone we come in contact with, it means that we're absent a very important quality that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have us embed in our hearts and demonstrate in our actions. Brothers and sisters, I want to just give an example of an individual that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised for the benefit of Muslims all the way up until the Qiyamah. Of course, the most important individual was the Prophet Muhammad himself. There's no greater, there's no more attractive personality than that of the Prophet Muhammad for us to want to imitate. But for the purpose of a khutbah, I want to talk about that man from the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad that all of the close sahabas of the Prophet Muhammad recognize this man as being, that sometimes they would just refer to him as being the first, that he's the first. Now, who was this person? Who was this first person? The first person to accept the message of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, his good friend from childhood. That he was the first man or woman that when the Prophet Muhammad shared this message of submission, he was the first one to embrace the message. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed the Muslims to establish this first Islamic state in Medina, he was still known as the first. That the close Sahaba would refer to him as just being, oh, he's first. And what they were meaning was that he was first in everything that was good. That if it was recited from the Qur'an, if the Prophet Muhammad said that you and I should be like this, we should have these qualities, that we should do certain things without hesitation. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was the one that was recognized as being first and foremost in doing whatever he understood that would get him closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let me just give just a few quick examples to move on. We've mentioned this example before. One morning after Salat al-Fajr, the Prophet Muhammad stepped outside of Masjid al-Nabi and he asked a few questions. He asked those who had come to Salat al-Fajr, how many of you have given sadaqah this morning? How many of you have gone to someone and put something in their hand that you know that they needed at this time? Umar ibn al-Khattab, and we know his story. Umar ibn al-Khattab was standing there when the question was answered, and his response was, oh, messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we just started our day. We're starting our day by coming to Salat al-Fajr. So how is it that we could do what you're asking at this time? So Abu Bakr said, well, yeah, I did. And he said that he did because Abu Bakr went on to explain that when I came to the masjid this morning, I saw a brother standing outside. I knew he was in need of sadaqah. He needed some help. And so before going in the masjid, I went into my pocket and I gave him sadaqah. Prophet Muhammad then asked, this morning, how many of you have visited the sick this morning? And that man that they call the first on the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad said that Omar said the same thing. We just started our day. How can we start the day visiting the sick? Abu Bakr as-Siddiq said, I remembered that I was told that Abu Rahman ibn Auf was sick. And so before coming to the masjid this morning, I went to his house to see how he was doing, and then I came to the masjid. The questioning went on. At the point of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and just hearing what it is that would bring him closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure, this is what he did. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was also known as one of the most tender-hearted, one of the most compassionate people from amongst the Ummah. That Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and his relations with others, that everyone understood, you go to Abu Bakr, he's going to be very accommodating for you. No matter what your situation is, he's going to accommodate you. He's going to make you feel good when you talk to him, when you interact with him, that this was the character that exuded from his skin, that everybody knew that this particular Sahaba had certain qualities about him, and that nothing could change those qualities. There's a narration that was narrated by Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, and it's coming from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas said that I once asked, O Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who amongst mankind are the most severely afflicted? Who are tested the most amongst the people? He, alayhi salam, said the prophets, then those nearest to them, and then those nearest to them. A man will be tested according to the level of his piety. Therefore, if he is firm in his religion, then his tribulations will be more severe. And if he is weak in his religion, then he will be tested according to the level of his religion. The slave of Allah will continue to face afflictions until they leave him walking upon the earth sinless. Brothers and sisters, the most difficult trials that this ummah of the Prophet Muhammad have ever faced in this history, this past history today and up until the day of judgment, is of course the death of the Prophet Muhammad. And this ummah selected Abu Bakr as-Siddiq under this tremendous trial at a time when the direction of Islam could have gone either way. Because there were so many tribes who were saying that our allegiance was to Muhammad sallallahu. We never questioned anything that he said, but he's dead. And so now you've selected this man who we know he was a close Sahaba of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, but we can't give him the same kind of allegiance. And so there was a tribe that said this thing that is a cardinal part of this deen called zakat, that we collect once a year and we give it and distribute it to the poor. This is something we gave to Muhammad sallallahu. This is not something we're going to give to Abu Bakr and let him distribute. He was the messenger of Allah. Abu Bakr is just another man, just like us. And so this soft-hearted, compassionate person, and there's so many descriptions in the Sirah literature about how at the time when Abu Bakr said that if they withhold just a camel's string that they tie in the camel's nose to guide a camel, if anyone withholds that which they gave to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, I'm going to war with them. I'm going because this is so important, this is so critical to the practice of this deen, that no one is going to be allowed to try to change what's required of us. So this very soft-hearted, compassionate person went and organized armies. Umar ibn al-Khattab and so many of the Sahaba were questioning Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. How can you do this? The Prophet Muhammad has just died. And now you're going to war against those who are withholding this account. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided this righteous brother. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have Abu Bakr as-Siddiq literally going to war, these wars of liberty, these wars of apostasy. Because Abu Bakr was saying that if you withhold any element of this faith, if you don't do, and you're deliberately saying, I'm not going to do it, and you may as well be identified as an enemy to the Muslims. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the greatest trial that the Ummah has faced, that the next won't be up until Qiyamah, until the last day, but the greatest trial that the Ummah has faced, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided individuals like Abu Bakr as-Siddiq to have them do that would help a continuation of this deen, that Islam would not die with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that those who had the strongest iman, that they would be the ones that would be confronted with the greatest success. And those whose faith is strong will have to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test you with greater tests than with any of the other things. Brothers and sisters, the test that this Ummah of Muhammad is facing, that we're facing today, is a very, sometimes earth-shaking, if you think about it. It's kind of earth-shaking kind of test, but it's not greater than what this Ummah has faced in the history of Islam. That what we are witnessing today, we can look throughout the history of Islam and we can see periods where even the Kaaba was totally destroyed by Muslims who were in the leadership amongst the Muslims, who used catapults to smash the Kaaba itself with gigantic stones. That this was a fitna, this was a test. Look throughout the history of Islam from the time of the Prophet Muhammad up until today. And what we see is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has tested this ummah from the time of the Prophet Muhammad and this will go on all the way up to Qiyamah. And so, how are you and I to respond to these tests, whether they're tests within our household, whether we have children that we come in after work and a hard day, and these children are so energetic and they're jumping, they're playing, and they're flipping over the couch, and they're doing all of these things. What is our responsibility? What will be our response? To show compassion to children, to babies within our own houses. Take them out of here. Get them out of my sight. Put them in their room and keep them in there until I go to bed. No. The compassion that we are called upon to show to each other is the compassion that we find in examples like Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. I use him as an example because he was not a prophet. He was not someone receiving divine revelation. That he was an individual that understood the relationship between his treatment of others and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, growing his iman, growing his faith, growing his conviction to this way of life of Islam altogether. So, brothers and sisters, there's not a time when you and I can say that I'm going to take off my kufi for a minute, I'm going to take off my throw for a minute, I'm going to relax the guidance that I know I should be following for a minute, and I'm going to handle this business. I'm going to do something that I know I shouldn't be doing. But just for a moment, I'll just relax. I'll just do these things and I'll just depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy to us. Brothers and sisters, this faith, and for those like myself who grew up in a non-Muslim household, a religious household, but was not Muslim, that there was no way I could have imagined growing up in the household that I grew up in, that there would be a faith that everything you do, from the time you wake up in the morning until the time that you go to bed, there's very specific guidelines for us to follow. There was no way growing up as a non-Muslim that I could have imagined that the real manly thing to do when you get angry is not to bust somebody upside their head, but to try to diffuse the situation, to try to be compassionate to others. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has preserved this deen as the Prophet Muhammad has practiced. We know what we're supposed to be doing. We know the guidelines of this faith. So all we must do is not a simple thing, but what we must do today, over 1,400 years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, that we have to hold fast to this Qur'an. And I know this sounds pretty simplistic, to hold fast to the guidance in the Qur'an and the guidance in the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, and we'll find our personal and collective lives are much easier to bear, no matter what the problems it is that we confront. Lord, all praises be to Allah. We praise Him and seek His assistance against the evils of our minds and against the unsuccessfulness of our actions. Whomsoever Allah guides, no one can be astray. And whomsoever Allah causes to err as a result of his own actions, no one can be the right. O Allah, help those who help the religion of Muhammad, and counts amongst them. Disappoint those who try to disgrace the religion of Muhammad, and do not make us those. Just a few quick announcements. The first one is that